Hello everyone. I'm going to try and project, but please put your hand up if you can't hear me. So I may have spoken to some of you already. My name's Craig. I'm part of the Appfox team. We're a UK-based Atlassian marketplace partner, and we have a number of applications for both Confluence and Jira. And in the presentation today, I'm going to focus on one of our Confluence applications called Compliance and how it can help you provide greater control over the content you have in Confluence. So the session title, as you can see, is Should Your Confluence Pages Be Open to Everyone? And we're going to focus in on how data classification can help give you greater control over the content that you have within your Confluence instance. So as we know, Confluence is an amazing central source of truth, and it provides a really good bridge between different teams, different projects, and the different documents that you have in your business in a day-to-day role. Lots of information can be shared, and lots of information can also be stored. And it brings us back to the question, well, when all this information is being shared, how much of it should be accessible to everyone in your organization? And the honest answer to that is that it depends. And the reason it depends is because there's lots of different information that can be stored in Confluence, and on the screen is only a small example of the information that you could have available in Confluence. And there's some of these things on the screen that you might think, actually, that wouldn't be shared with the wider group. It would actually be a select group of individuals that would have access to these pages. And examples of that could be employee appraisals. That's not likely to be something that will be widely accessible to the organization. So I had a really good conversation with one of our customers, and they said that Confluence is typically open by default, but it needs to be closed where it matters. And as I mentioned with some of those documents, it's great that Confluence is open by default for some documents, but for others, it's not ideal. And there's obviously some risk that's associated with that. And the risk is that pages could contain information that's intended for certain individuals or groups in the business. Some documents might even be in a draft format, and they're not at the stage where you would want to share them or make them accessible to a wider audience. Or even more importantly, some documents or pages in Confluence might have confidential, proprietary, or even sensitive data or personal information. Now, many of you will be using Confluence already on a day-to-day basis, and the question is, how can we control this? How can we limit the access? And there's a number of ways that you can do that in Confluence in both data center, server, and cloud. And some of them include page permissions, space access, even personal spaces if you wanted to keep some content to yourself before you release it to a wider audience. Or as a lesser example, you may use labels or macros to say, this content is still in a draft format, not for wider distribution. But in this short presentation, I wanted to show you that there is a better way, there's an alternative, and that is data classification. And so if anyone has visited our stand during the conference and spoken with about me with some of our apps, data classification is one of the things that we've been talking to people about. And before diving into how you can do that in Confluence, I just wanted to start with the definition. So data classification is the process of analyzing structured or unstructured data and giving it a bit more structure and categorizing it based on the information that's contained in the pages. Now, typically in Confluence and many other tools that are similar, a lot of the information that's created by companies and businesses is unstructured. Around 80% of the information is all unstructured, and to be able to apply data classification properly, you need to add structure, and data classification is a really good way of doing that. So why use data classification? So first off, it gives you much greater awareness and control of the information that you have in Confluence. If you have data loss prevention strategies in your organization, data classification is one of the aspects of that and one of the really important parts. It can also help you identify information that is potentially higher risk or more sensitive, and obviously with that information and awareness, you can make better decisions and more informed decisions. Now, the other part to this as well is obviously there's a number of regulatory requirements around the world, and I've put a couple on the screen that are obviously very well known, whether that's internationally, in the US, or in Europe, and data classification can help with some aspects of the compliance towards these. And data classification typically will manifest itself as a hierarchy, and on the right-hand side it's just a very basic illustration of 4 levels, but every organization is different, and yours, if you're using it, may look different to what you see on the screen, but this is just an example. So data classification is really useful, but it is effectively just a label on a document saying it's confidential, it's highly restricted, or it's open access. Now, the really cool thing that you can do is align page access with classification levels. So an example of this could be if you had something that was confidential, you'd want to restrict the page access to that. I'm going to show you how you can do that. So one of our marketplace applications called Compliance for Confluence, which is available on data center, server, and cloud, will give you the opportunity to use data classification and align it to page access and page permissions. So it comes with a number of core features, and I'll just focus on classification levels and the restrictions, but it also contains, on our on-premise solution, sensitive data detection and some statistics and reporting. Now, the classification levels here, as you can see, they're built within the page. So I've just given an example here of the 4 that we had on the previous slide. But you have a drop-down. You click into the page, you can use the drop-down, and you have different levels that you can choose within the page. Now, you can see quite clearly that it's very visible within the page. It's obvious for users what the level is when it's selected at the top of the page. And it's also customizable. So every organization is likely to have slightly different policies and processes when it comes to data classification and information management. If you have certain terms, whether it's confidential, top secret, executive team, so on and so forth, you can customize these levels to match your policies. And it's also controlled. It's not something that every user in Confluence can configure. It's only for administrators as well. Now, you have the levels, and then when they're set up, you can then align the access restrictions to those levels. So on the screen here, you can see the 4 levels on the right-hand side here. And you've got groups and users. Now, the individuals that are added into those fields will have access to those pages, and the people that are not added into those fields will not have access. So what you can see here is probably quite small, but for the highly restricted, Confluence administrators have been added, so anyone in the Confluence administrator group will have access to the highly restricted pages, plus a few users. And this is customizable. As I said, the admins will control who will set this up. Oh, sorry, the admins will control which users and groups are configured here. And the other part, just to point out, the final bullet point is that these restrictions can be configured at a global level, but also if you want to get a bit more granular with it, you can do it on a space level as well. And finally, as I mentioned as well, there's a couple of other features in Compliance for Confluence that will give you greater insight and control. In our server and data center version, we have sensitive data detection. So using a preset of regular expressions, you can search for things like IP addresses, email addresses, within a page and automatically take action based on that. And there's also some statistics and reporting as well. So if you want to see how many pages you have at different classification levels, you can also do that. So as I mentioned, page access is really important. It's a really important topic. Confluence is an amazing tool, and the more and more teams that use it, the more and more value they get out of it. But obviously it's important to protect what matters to not just ourselves, but the wider organization. And data classification is one of the ways that you can potentially do that. So it's free to try on the Atlassian marketplace for 30 days, as all the other applications that are available as well. So I'd highly recommend, if you're interested, give it a try, see what you think. If you've got any questions, by all means, reach out to us. And yeah, just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you've enjoyed the talk.